Welcome back to class. Welcome to the last part of this chapter, which deals with the money market. In the first part, we get to know one theoretical model, and in this theoretical model, it was a case that the central bank was able to control money supply completely. We were also working with this assumption that the central bank, when they want to perform an expansionary monetary policy, they are printing new notes. Then these new notes are stored in a helicopter and distributed to the society. So it was a case that the central bank had complete control over money supply. In this chapter, we will come up with new assumptions which highlight the role of the commercial banking sector in this money creation process. So the assumptions until now were as follows. The central bank determines the money supply directly, and the commercial banks do not play a role in the transmission mechanism at all. The new assumptions are as follows. We only have checkable accounts. There is no money in circulation. What does it imply? No money in circulation implies that we have no notes. So we are not paying with coins and notes, but only with the funds we have on our checkable accounts. In German, it would be the Girokonto. We have minimum reserve requirements. Theta is equal to 2%. So in case that one private agent has some funds on the checkable account, then the commercial bank has to hold some reserves with the central bank. In case that the private person holds 100 euros, then 2 euros have to be held on an account with the central bank. Now we assume that the central bank is buying one bond from commercial bank A. The value of this bond is equal to 100, so that the so-called monetary base increases by 100 units. H, this is the monetary base. And now it is the case that the commercial banking sector starts to work with this money. The first bank, A, gives a loan to customer A of 100, and agent A transfers the money to customer B at bank B. Now, agent B leaves the money on his checkable account. It's not the case that agent B can get cash like coins and notes from the bank because it doesn't exist. So agent B leaves the money on his checkable account, and bank B has to hold 2% as minimum reserve requirements and gives a loan of 98 euros to agent C. Agent C transfers the money to agent D at bank D. Agent D leaves the 98 euros on his checkable account and holds 2% as minimum reserve requirement and gives a loan of 96.04 euros to agent E. And now we assume that this game is played until infinity, so that also the last bank is giving a credit of 1 cent to one customer. So it is the case that the money, the funds which are on this checkable accounts increase tremendously, and we would like to know by how much does in the end money supply increases. We have to solve this equation here. In the first step, money supply increases by 100 euro. In the second step, money supply increases by additional 98 euros. And in the third step, money supply increases by 96.04 euros. And we have written it in this form that here we have money supply on the left-hand side. This is the increase in the monetary base H. 0.98 is 1 minus the minimum reserve requirement. More formally, we can write equation 6 as follows. M, money supply, is equal to the monetary base H, and then in brackets the 1 plus 1 minus the minimum reserve requirements to the power of 1, plus 1 minus minimum reserve requirements to the power of 2, and so on, until we get to the last term, 1 minus theta to the power of infinity. It is the case that this is a very long expression, but as you can see, here it is possible to condense this expression in a way that we get a very, very small expression. We have to perform several steps, and this is what we do in the following. We would like to derive with this very nice formula. In the first step, we have to divide equation 7 by 1 minus theta, so we put 1 minus theta on the other hand side of the equation. It pops up here in the denominator. When we divide 1 by 1 minus theta, we get to this term. When we divide 1 minus theta to the power of 1 by 1 minus theta, then this 1 minus theta will cancel out and we get a 1. So this term divided by that term gives us this one here. When we divide this term by 1 minus theta, we get this term here, and so on. Then we have a 1 minus theta to infinity here. When we divide it by this 1 minus theta, we get to this relationship. Once more, we have here this first equation. This was equation 7 and equation 8. Now we have to compute the difference between equation 8 and equation 9. We get on the left-hand side m minus 1 over 1 minus theta times m. And then on the right-hand side, we get minus 1 over 1 minus theta, which is here. But then it is the case that this one will cancel out against this one because we are computing the difference. 1 minus 1 does not pop up in this expression anymore. This 1 minus theta to the power of 1 will cancel out against this 1 minus theta to the power of 1 because we compute the difference. And this 1 minus theta to infinity minus 1 will cancel out against this one because we compute the difference. We are ending up with plus 1 minus theta to the power of infinity, which gives you this expression here. Equation 10 is just the repetition from the previous slide. Now we have to check the last term, 1 minus theta to infinity, converges to 0. This is equal to 0 and drops out because 1 minus theta is smaller than 1. And a term smaller than 1 to the power of infinity converges to 0. This term drops out. Then on the left-hand side, I would like to combine this m with this m. So we have to write this m on a common denominator, and hence this term here, 1 minus theta over 1 minus theta, this reflects this first m. And then we have a minus 1. And this minus 1 stems from the second expression here. We have a positive 1 in equation 11 and a negative 1. This drops out so that we are left with a minus theta in the numerator of this fraction. Now, when we multiply through this expression by the reciprocal value of this fraction, when we are multiplying through by minus 1 minus theta over theta, it will be the case that we have isolated m on the left-hand side of this equation, and this 1 minus theta will cancel out against this 1 minus theta. This negative sign will cancel out against that negative sign, and we are done. We have derived this very nice relationship. Money supply is equal to 1 over theta times h. Money supply depends on the minimum reserve requirements h and the monetary base h. This term, 1 over theta, can be labeled as the money multiplier, And hence, the larger the minimum reserve requirements, the larger theta, the lower is the money multiplier. In this model, with our assumptions, the money multiplier corresponds to the reciprocal value of the minimum reserve requirements. When we plug in the information we have, like theta is equal to 2% and the increase in the monetary base is equal to 100, then we know with this increase in the monetary base, the commercial banking sector is able to create 5,000 units of money. So this model highlights that the commercial banking sector play an important role in the money creation process. The commercial banking sector is very important, and the central bank has to rely on the commercial banks. And when the central banks make a decision by how much money supply should increase, then it's a case that the central bank has to rely on the commercial banking sector, that they play their role in the same way as they did in the past. Let's analyze how money supply increased in the euro area. To some extent, you are already familiar with this graph because we already had a look at this relationship, but only for the time period from 1999, the introduction of the euro, until 2006. There we learned that there is a target value for the increase of money supply, which is equal to 4.5%, but that the actual development of money supply was much larger. So in 2006, it was a case that the actual growth rate of money supply was at the level of 8%. And this is almost double the value of the target value. After 2006, it's a case that the growth rate of money supply increased even further to the level of 12%. So this is completely off target. Why is it the case that money supply increased so much? It increased so much because of the fact that some commercial banks, they got crazy in this time period. Like they were financing a lot of real estate projects, they were giving a lot of real estate loans, for example, in Spain or in Ireland. And when a commercial bank is giving a loan to a private person, then money is created. What we can see here in this time period is the build-up of the real estate bubble in Spain and Ireland. What happened in the crisis? In the crisis, it's a case that money supply did not grow anymore. The growth rate of money supply took the value of 0%. So money supply does not grow anymore. But the target value is here at 4.5%. So after the crisis, it's a case that the actual growth rate of money supply is below target. And what would you do in case that you are the central banker and you want to increase the growth rate of money supply because it's below target? There are two instruments which can be used. One instrument is we increase the monetary base. How can we do that? We can buy bonds from the commercial banking sector. So the central bank can print money, buy bonds from the commercial banking sector, and increase the monetary base H. Another instrument is the minimum reserve requirements. What is very important here is that the central bank has to decrease the minimum reserve requirements, because when theta decreases, then the money multiplier becomes larger. Let's check whether the central bank played around with the minimum reserve requirements. It's mentioned here in this press release that the reserve ratio was set at 2% at the start of stage 3 of the European Economic and Monetary Union, EMU, and is lowered to 1% in January 2012. So it was the case that in 1999 the ECB set the minimum reserve requirements to the level of 2% and kept theta constant from 1999 until 2012. So it is the case that this instrument was not changed on a weekly basis or quarterly basis or yearly basis. It was constant for a time period of more than 10 years. But then, like 4 years after the crisis started, suddenly the ECB wakes up and realizes that there is another instrument they can use. They can reduce the minimum reserve requirements from 2% to 1% and thereby try to increase the money multiplier so that money supply growth at the target value of 4.5%. This is the end of the lecture related to Chapter 4. Thank you very much that you attended this lecture. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.